Hey everybody, this is Night Watch Nate, your host of the Night Watch podcast. How about that news coming out of China, huh? Real news is that there's actually news coming out of China, and that our poor, pathetic excuses of a journalist in our country are actually starting to cover what's going on in China.
We start with these protests spreading rapidly and intensely across China. Thousands of demonstrators are angry with COVID lockdowns, many of them calling for democracy and political freedoms and an end to President Xi Jinping's regime.
And the unrest sweeping across China as citizens rise up in mass protest against severe COVID restrictions. Some are now calling for China's president to step down.
What we're talking about with zero COVID is a system that has control over every aspect of daily life, of how you travel, where you can travel, near daily testing, quarantines, lockdowns, restrictions on your mobility.
And it's been a long, brutal, painful, grueling process to get to this point. Over the last, it's been now 3+ years since the COVID con kicked off. Yeah, those people have been suffering some of the most cruel and unusual punishment just for living in that communist hellhole, I guess. So yeah, people are finally, some people mock the Chinese and they say, you know what, they wouldn't be in this position if they just had they weren't such sheep, right? Had a little spine. Well, it's easy to say in America where you can, all day long, be a little keyboard warrior and, trash talk all you want the President of the United States. But in China, if you do that publicly, you are literally risking your life, or at least some pretty good prison time for daring to question or criticize the CCP. Let alone as some of these college kids are out there chanting, for an end of the Chinese Communist Party. That's a pretty big no-no, and there's a long history. There's a fairly recent history. Some people have made mention of Tiananmen Square. Well, yeah, the CCP was that back in '89. I think it was. I was just brushing up myself on the history of it all. We all know the classic depictions of the tank man, the guy that was standing in front of the row of tanks, and how moving that was and everything. But some of the finer details of exactly what transpired that day are pretty shocking. If you haven't read them yet, I suggest you brush up on your history as well. I'll just go over it real quick with a broad-toothed comb. So yeah, they were. So there was a threat to the regime, the ruling party in China, and they tried to demonize this liberal trend of these starry-eyed, visionary college kids, right? School kids. They wanted a taste of this kind of a Western democracy, this kind of a of the people type of government, not just a handed down from on high communist party central rule without any at least in our country we have the pretense, the play right between the two party systems to make it appear as if we have a choice. But in China, no, you're pretty much limited to the CCP. And so there was this uprising, this populist uprising around that period, and it got so bad that some of the entrenched powers that be in China saw this threat. I think it was at one point estimated 1 million people mostly college kids protesting in Tiananmen Square. And it was actually, I don't want to get into the whole history, but like to commemorate one of their leaders who had just died, who tried to challenge the CCP and was ousted. And of course, 2 years after being ousted, he died. Not quite sure. I haven't looked up how exactly he died. Maybe he had a heart attack, right? Maybe it was a blood clot. I don't know. So it's just kind of to commemorate that leader, and that's why they got together on that date. And what happened was that the entrenched leadership saw this as a direct threat, that this was going to cause civil war, and so they sent in the military. And they sent them in first unarmed, as the story goes, but that didn't last very long, so they sent them in with, you know, AK-47s and tanks. And these brave young people stood there arm in arm while they were mowed down by machine guns and literally ran over by tanks, like driving 40 miles per hour straight into the crowds, plowed down. There's a description of all the bodies. They made pie out of them, they said, in their own words. They made pie out of the bodies by driving them over repeatedly by these tanks, you know, until it was basically a pile of mush. And then the bulldozers came in and scooped them all up and tossed them in the, incinerated them, and sprayed out the gutters of all the blood, and problem solved, right? Of course, as China does, they lied about the body count originally. You know, you expect them to tell the truth. No. And so the original estimates were, well, from the Chinese government, maybe 200 people killed that day. I guess some papers, I don't know why they just came out recently. In 2017, I looked up an article from the UK, some intelligence briefings or something like that. Estimated as high as 10,000 people were massacred that day, Tiananmen Square. And so this same CCP, for the last 3 years, has just been oppressing, starving, locking up its people, you know, all in the name of a public health scare, of course, because they're that concerned, right? After mowing down 10,000 of their own youth and driving them over repeatedly with tanks and scooping them up like pie fixing, I guess. They're that concerned about the health of their population that they have to keep them super, super, super safe, guys. Zero COVID. That's the real story to me, is that the you know, some of these Western news agencies, and maybe part of it is that one of the BBC's own journalists got beat up, kicked and beaten by the police and arrested. But also it's just this massive populist uprising now that they can't just continue to turn a blind eye to, because, you know, the PSYOP, and that's what I've been calling it, there's no other really sane explanation for what's going on in China other than this is a big giant psychological operation on the people to push people and to control people and to treat people literally like animals, to the degree that, you know, just kind of a trial run, think of it that way, for the New World Order, right? Like, this is the ideal China. They've said this repeatedly. I guess George Soros recently came out with this, Klaus Schwab.
So we have to define how the world should look like, which we want to come out of this transformation period. I respect China's achievements, which are tremendous over the last over 40 years. I think it's a role model for many countries.
Klaus Schwab praised China. You know, there's been several people, though, in the past. You know, I brought up Bill Gates a while back. You know, he says, what a great example China is to the world, just how they treat their people. So, and we've known this for a while now, that China is the model for the New World Order. And it's this technocratic nightmare where, it's cashless, completely cashless. They're completely controlled through this social credit score system based upon QR codes linked to your smartphones, and which of course they've been implementing with this Everything app, this WeChat app in China now over the COVID years to suppress information and also to control the pop. What's funny is I think it was just in the news that, isn't it ironic, like just after this populist uprising and the attack on the first the media tries to say that it was all inspired from this apartment fire, which was pretty crazy. Once again, you can only trust the numbers so far as you can throw them from China, because originally they said, it was just a handful, maybe a dozen tops, people killed in this massive apartment fire. Well, there's other estimates that are a little higher, saying as many as 40 people are killed in this apartment complex that was on fire. And that's probably more realistic, because the problem is, and the reason I bring that up is because some news agencies are saying that's what sparked all this uprising. Well, this has been in the making for some time, and it's just now the psychological operation on the minds of the Chinese people is just now, I think, spilling over. They finally had enough. One person brought up another podcast I was watching, Chinese citizen, that soccer, I guess, is really important to the Chinese people, and they've been watching these World Cups, and it's like they're in other countries and they're crammed together, these massive audiences, and nobody's wearing a mask, right? And so they get that little glimpse of what it looks like in a free country, right? Which has always made America popular, right? We have all these other countries see our American media and they're like, wow, those people are really living the life. That's what freedom kind of looks like, right? Kind of. It's getting more and more restrictive, our definition, by the minute, it seems. But so yeah, that was one speculation. The World Cup, but it's this 3 years, like I said, however long it's been since they've had this zero COVID policy in China, of this constant, every 48 hours in some areas, they have to get a COVID test, a positive COVID test. And if it's not, if you get a red, a lot of places you're going to end up in the quarantines, right? And what is this doing to their standard of living? What is this doing to their careers? They're just trying to earn their bread and butter when these people are constantly being threatened with quarantine and whole areas on lockdown, right? Whole cities of millions and millions of people. And why would China do this to its own economy? That's another question. It's like, because that's the latest headline is, oh, this is going to affect the supply chain once again. So keep an eye out, keep an ear out. Every time you hear a story, it's like Russia and the pipelines, right? Some other rogue nation, some other threat in the world, other than our own politicians and their draconian measures, like during the COVID. Someone else we can blame it on a far corner of the planet. That look at the effect. Don't just look at the cause. Don't look at Putin. Don't look at these other actors on the stage. All the world is a stage, right? Shakespeare. Look at the cause. How will this affect all of our standard of living? I think that's ultimately the big picture that we should be looking at. Because I think a lot of these national boundaries, the CCP, Putin, Soviet, Russia, a lot of it's real superficial in the big picture, because they're all part of the same big club, right? And we're not in it, right? Like George Carlin likes to say, or like to say. So one theory is that the fires, they couldn't access the apartment complex in China because everything was on lockdown. And you know what? There were stories months and months prior of people being locked up in those massive apartment complexes for weeks, and some of them were starving. People starving in their own apartments. I've seen far too many, video footage on the Twitter, mainly, of people jumping to their deaths from, 20, 30-story apartment complex, jumping out the window of their own apartments because they've reached a state of that much desperation. And I think that's really what it is. It's that, once, and it's this continual grinding down of the minds of these people to the point where, life isn't even worth living anymore if tomorrow's gonna be the same as today. And that's where I think they've pushed these people to this breaking point where they're just like, you know what, I don't give a damn, right? You can kill me at this point. I'm not gonna keep on living like this. And it's unfortunate, that the people have let it go this far. But like I said, when they had this, just a few decades ago, the CCP mowing down people to the tune of 10,000 bodies, just cruel massacre of its own people, and they still can't commemorate, that date to this day at Tiananmen Square, the massacre, because the censorship controls are so strong over there in China. Don't mention the Tiananmen Square thing. No, that's bad PR for the party. And yet you have, with all this insanity going on, so we have the Foxconn, biggest iPhone manufacturer in the world, erupting in protest because tons of people left their jobs. They hired on a ton more, and they're giving them promises of all these high wages, and they didn't fulfill their promises. But not only that, the little fine print that a lot of the news didn't pick up on, they were locking things down again. And what was it? A few months prior, there was another, I can't remember the name of it now, they always have these strange names. There was another phone manufacturer, I think it was another Taiwanese company. There was another protest. I hadn't even heard of this one because that's how, controlled our news is. But just a few months ago, there was a prior protest at a phone manufacturing facility, and ran out of a Taiwanese company, and these people were literally, talk about modern day slave plantations. They were locked into these factories. They couldn't leave, they couldn't see their families. They had to live in the factory, and everything was on this zero COVID lockdown, nonsense. And the flash, there's videos of in IKEA with people trying to get the hell out of the building because there was one of these flash, somebody was detected as having COVID and they were within the same building, and so everybody in that building was just breaking through the doors trying to get the hell out of there because they knew that if they didn't, their fate would be probably quarantine, sent off to another quarantine center. They're building these massive complexes, and they intend to use them, right? And all this insanity going on in China for the last 3 years, and where has the news coverage been? Where has the public outcry been? I heard of this mainly on Twitter, and some of these Chinese-speaking people tweeting out some of these smartphone videos on Twitter. But where's the mainstream news covering any of this up until now? When they basically have to, because it's this much of a big story, rioting at the world's largest iPhone factory. Now people clashing with police out in the streets, chanting, end the CCP. One of my favorite was I saw a video of them chanting, and it had the subtitles below. That's the only reason I could tell what they were saying. But they had them chanting, "No more PCR tests. We want freedom." And I'm like, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Because they realize they're woken up to the fact that this is all a giant scam. And the news came out just today. I read a headline that it's the second largest spike in one day. I think they claimed it was like 40,000 or something cases of COVID in China. Convenient timing, right? And that's what they do with these PCR code COVID passport apps on people's phones. They've been notorious for this over the past, is every time that there's any kind of an uprising, wouldn't you know it, everybody's phone turns red and we have to quarantine y'all. So it's a great way to, for the CCP to remain in power and to crush anyone who questions their tyrannical form of government during this so-called COVID crisis. That's what I've been saying for a while now. The only thing going viral during COVID is tyranny, right? And it's just a sliding scale. It depends on which country you live in, and how much enshrined rights, freedoms that you have in America has always been the gold standard, right? Because we have a constitutional republic, not a democracy, a constitutional republic that codifies in our law the freedom, the liberties of the individual, the rights of the individual not to be infringed, God-given rights, mind you, at birth. But those rights of an individual cannot be infringed even by a mob, right? Even by the will of a mob, which is democracy, basically, in short. Mobocracy. And, it's in democracy, it can always be a majority that persecutes the minority. So all this talk about minority rights and equality and all this BS that you hear from the left all day long, yeah, it doesn't quite hold up in the long run, in the big picture, but they don't think too long run, do they? They don't think past the last pointless cause that they've stood for, that they think is like super important, right? Like breaking the glass ceiling or getting your quota of, brown-skinned people in CEO positions or whatever you want to champion as your cause next. So yeah, what's really ironic is you have people like celebrities like Alyssa Milano protesting on Twitter about how she got a Volkswagen, yes, German Nazi Volkswagen, to protest and to drop her Tesla because she's so concerned with freedom of speech, I guess. Because hate speech, as they like to label it, as the UN just recently came out. Where's the UN in calling out the CCP right now? No, they're gonna focus on hate speech and pre-crime, the potential of words to create future crimes, potentially. And meanwhile, back here in America, right? Land of the free, home of the brave. We have, over here in China, we have people that are being oppressed, and they, with a pretty recent memory of their own governments having not been able to solve their problems peacefully, with unarmed soldiers, they sent in the armed soldiers, touting AK-47s, to mow down the peacefully protesting unarmed population, right? And so in this country, we've had for so long now this, I guess you could call it a fallback plan, a plan B, safeguard of our freedoms. And it is codified in our very law. The supreme law of the land, the Constitution, being the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms against an oppressive government, potentially. And meanwhile, here in the land of the free, right, home of the brave, we have leftist lawmakers, including the President of the United States, who's already demonized half of the population, as domestic terrorists, basically. You have leftist lawmakers calling for, yes, exploiting yet more tragedy in these recent massacres, namely the one here in Colorado, an LGBTQ club. One thing they don't like to talk about is how the perpetrator of that crime is now claiming he's non-binary, so it doesn't quite fit the script. But yes, you have leftist lawmakers, chomping at the bit, ready to push more assault weapons bans, right? Because that's what you do in free America. But we're not like the Chinese, right, guys? I think personally, a lot of these celebrities, do you see like Alyssa Milano, crushing her iPhone with a hammer to protest the slave conditions, literal slave plantations in these Chinese factories like Foxconn? No, not really. They're gonna complain and switch cars. I mean, it's pretty tough when you gotta go buy a new Volkswagen to drop your 2-month-old Tesla. It's a pretty rough life, but yeah, to protest the threat that freedom might reign on the internet, true free speech. That's what they're going to protest, rather than like the true insanity, the true crimes against humanity going on in China right now. Makes perfect sense, guys. Perfect sense. So my thing is, these people really do. I think they really fit in pretty well, and maybe they should just pack up. They've all made threats, right? If Trump's gonna get elected, I'm moving out of America, I'm going to Canada or something. How about y'all go to communist China? You'll love the internet there, right? You'll never say anything that offends you, as long as you're 100% loyal to the party, which you pretty much are already with the left, but Democratic Party. But yeah, I think he'll fit right in. And a lot of these representatives in office who, obviously primarily identify on the left, I think you should all pack your bags and head over there yourselves, because I think in a lot of these people's minds, they're already there as is already. So anyway, I've spoken too long. I just wanted to get that off my chest. It's kind of nice sometimes, it just feels nice to rant, just to get it all out. And it's been a little while, so you haven't noticed. I've been kind of on and off, spotty. I've been trying to cover, just compile some of the videos, but I've been seeing the insanity unfolding in China right now. That's that not too distant history, that not too distant past. It's something that we should keep in mind, and don't hold it against the CCP to commit similar atrocities today, in today's civilized world, right? Now, the atrocities they've been committing are all things that you probably never hear, because, all those dissenters, some of those people might not remember, but there were large protests going on right up before COVID. Sorry about that, my phone just cut off. So yeah, some of you might remember there were actually protests going on in China, pretty good, scale protests, just right up to the point where COVID kicked off. So I think it was kind of convenient for the CCP to have COVID as the pretext to kind of clamp down. And there's reports of all kinds of people being locked up and arrested, sent to different black sites. Well, yeah, what do you think happens to anybody that's a true threat to the Communist Party in China to this day, all under the pretext of protecting its citizens against COVID, right? We saw similar things unfold with some of the leaders in Africa, right? That died mysteriously. And I did a couple shows on this. They didn't get nearly enough views, but that's YouTube. Yeah, it's just convenient way of assassinating your opponents, of taking care of your problems by blaming it on yet another COVID death, right? And I think that's really what's been going on behind the scenes. A lot of these people, we just see a glimpse. We just see a little tiny crumb of this rotting corpse of the Chinese CCP and the atrocities that they've been committing over there in their own country against their own people. And they're already concerned with population. Once again, like I say, they're the ideal, right, of the New World Order. One-child policy. They're concerned with overpopulation, and yes, they're concerned about maintaining the status quo, maintaining their power. So, yeah, anybody who's a real threat, I'm sure they've already been, rounded up, sent off to a quarantine / concentration camp, and I wouldn't hold it against them to have gas chambers over there in some of those restricted quarantine areas, and massive burial pits as well. But it's just insanity. It's sickening, and this kind of information needs to get out more and more, because apparently the communist fake news agencies that are propagating information to the American people have some kind of invested interest over there. Otherwise, they would have been probably calling out this story a long time ago, doing their job, right? And you wouldn't have to go hunt for this stuff on Twitter or random YouTube channels like my own. But this is, I think, one prime example why we do need alternative, news sites, data gathering centers, journalists, whatever you want to call the likes of this show. This is a prime example why we need to support, freedom of information on the internet. And it's insane, guys. Yeah, I feel my heart goes out to these people, these brave people. Make no mistake, these people standing up in the streets, these young college kids, all different walks of life, these people that have finally had enough, that have made up in their own minds that if we have to keep living this way, then life isn't worth living. So we're going to stand up and we're going to shout, we're going to protest, we're going to say we want an end to this COVID insanity. We want our freedom, and we want the CCP done away with. And like I said, make no mistake, that takes a crap ton of bravery in that particular context. Living under that regime in China. We take our freedoms for granted in this country, but yeah, I would definitely not fit in a country like communist China. I would have been shipped off, thrown into a van, and taken off to a black site a long time ago. Obviously. But yeah, heart goes out to those people. Prayers, and let's just hope for the best. Hopefully that they don't repeat another Tiananmen Square. But like I said, who knows what has already transpired in that country that we'll never hear about. You know, how many people have already been assassinated that'll never make the news. You know, there'll never be any evidence. Everything's covered up. And only God, right? Only God knows what kind of evil has been unleashed over there in Red China. From that sick, bloated, disgusting, power-hungry system they call the CCP, perpetrated on its own people. But it should be a wake-up call, because like I've been saying, this is a PSYOP. I can see it no other way. It makes no other sense than this being a PSYOP, psychological operation on their own people, just to see how far can we push people. You know, how much restrictive lockdown measures can we implement on a population, a large population, and get away with it until they finally break. And apparently they've reached that breaking point. But, you know, time will tell how this actually pans out. And just keep in mind, this is not just a isolated in China kind of a subject. This is, if we believe in prophecy, this is soon to come to our own shores. And we need to ask ourselves, in all sincerity, how are we going to respond when it comes here? Because this being a trial run, as I see it, China is the ideal of this New World Order. This is total control. This is a total technocratic, cashless, digital ID, mark of the beast system that's already in full operation over there in China. And it's just a matter of time, and it's just a matter of enough manufactured crises until they can try to implement the same crap here, right? Don't say this that it'll never happen here, because I've already seen American citizens willfully give up a ridiculous amount of freedom. Churches being closed, senseless mask mandates, the abuse of children in schools, stunting of their sorry, I'm trying to drive at the same time as talk. Stunting of their of their development, and the shutting down of small businesses everywhere, and yeah, this whole idea that it could never happen here is a dangerous thought to keep in your head. Because the founding fathers knew that they knew their history, and if you know your history, tyranny is always right at the door, right? Scratching at the door like a wild beast, waiting to be let in by a hapless, childlike citizen of any country that doesn't see the true threat for what it is, right? Reminds me of a Little Red Riding Hood and the big bad wolf. Yeah. That's about it. You let them in, you let them get their foot in the door, the next thing, they're gnawing on your leg and you're bleeding to death. Give them an inch, they take a mile. This is the thinking of these control freak psychopaths. They want total power. Ultimately, they want to be worshipped as God. They want to take on the prerogatives of the Most High. And that's why Mark of the Beast ultimately involves false worship. Revelations 13:15. And so yeah, China's a great example, a great role model for this future New World Order. Cashless, beast tech system. But ultimately it'll come down to, where's your allegiance? Who do you worship? Who is your authority above all else? As for me, it's the King of Kings. It's the one true God of the universe, not these little petty play gods that come and go on the world stage. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I got some strange lighting on my face. I realize that. I got to get some supplies. Keep in touch. Thanks for watching. I know it's been long, but I had a lot to say, so hey, got to get it out somewhere, right? Anyway, God bless everybody. Stay frosty. It's pretty easy to do with the temperature out lately. Snow is coming in. I gotta get back home before I get snowed in. Yeah, get right with God. Man, get your head on straight, fastened on tight. Get your house in order. Live each day to the fullest. That's my prayer. And again, my prayer goes out to the Chinese people. Help this be a powerful movement of God. Whoever wins ultimately in this fight, help God win in that more souls were converted to the truth. And our God is a God of freedom. Freedom of the individual. Liberty of conscience, right? If I want to go outside and risk my own health without strapping on a face diaper, so be it. It's not the role of government to legislate morality. We gotta be careful with that one, especially on the right. We can never legislate morality. Only God can change us from within, and Christ being the highest example that we have as human beings, most powerful example, the standard, right? So read your Bibles, get right with God, get your house in order, get as prepared as you can, but like I said, leave the rest to God, because ultimately it'll be our faith that's going to get us through the rough road ahead. All right, God bless everybody. This is Nightwatch Nate, signing out.
What China has achieved for the health and well-being of its own people and for people around the world has been inspiring. By working together, continuing to support inclusive innovation, and making sure nobody is left behind, I'm confident we will not only end this pandemic, but build a better, fairer future.